Mohamed died actually on Wednesday. That, of course, was the day before the 26th anniversary of the terrible deaths in Paris of his eldest son, Dodi, and the family's dear friend, Diana, Princess of Wales. And he was entombed in a private mausoleum on his estate in Surrey yesterday, bracketing that terrible anniversary. So if you believe in kismet, an Arabic word meaning fate, maybe fate was at work here. Of course, I was very sad. I am sad. I knew him for 37 years. I only worked for him for 10 years, and I retired from Harrods as Director of Public Affairs, as you intimated, 25 years ago. But I remain friends with him. He was a tremendous life force. He was obviously controversial, but I feel that he did more good in this world than all his critics combined. At one time, he employed 25,000 people in this country through House of Fraser. And the people who worked for him and the people who were his customers and the fans of his football club, they know the real Mohamed, and they cherished his friendship and they cherished what he did. But there were many, many, many people who never met him, who benefited from him. He was the biggest single donor ever to Great Ormond Street Hospital for Sick Children, the most famous children's hospital in the world. When he donated the MRI scanner, when it didn't have one, he couldn't believe that a great children's hospital didn't have a scanner like that. So he bought one because his son, Karim, was being treated there. He contracted meningitis as a baby, and Mohamed spent many nights sleeping there. And he decided to help the hospital, which he did. And as I say, he was the biggest single individual donor, although, of course, the Wishing Well Fund, which was brilliant, raised £32 million. He was controversial, but a lot of people agreed with what he said, and a lot of people believed that he was right, and he pursued it. He was very worried that even 10 years after the tragedy in Paris, there was no inquest, and eventually one started, and it took 6 months. And the jurors, 11 ordinary Londoners, were pushed very hard by the coroner and by the coroner's counsel, who is now the Lord Chief Justice, Lord Burnett of Malden. They were pushed very hard to bring in a verdict of accidental death, but they didn't. They stood firm, and they brought in the most serious verdict they could, which was unlawful killing. Mohamed accepted that. He accepted it because at the beginning of the inquests, Lord Justice Scott Baker, the coroner, said to the jury, and he said in his summing up, he said that the verdict of murder was not open to them. In other words, they couldn't return a verdict of murder. So they brought in the most serious and grave verdict that they could. It was a very traumatic time. The week between the deaths of Diana and Dodi and the funeral of Diana in Westminster Abbey was very traumatic. It was the longest time I ever remember him staying away from the shop. And when he came back, he was greeted by people who were sharing his grief, which went around the world.
Michael, you say there that he accepted the conclusions of the inquest. Did he ever come to peace with the circumstances of his son's death?
Well, it's an extremely perceptive question. Of course, he said to me, you know, I could see the sadness at the back of his eyes. I knew him very well. And he said, I can't look like I feel. I can't go around looking sad. He said, I've got 7,000 employees at Harrods. I've got a family. I've got a football team. I've got to look optimistic. But life was never quite the same for him. He'd lost his eldest child. And, of course, Dodi and Diana, he believed very, very firmly that they were going to have a golden life together. And to see that all ended in such a terrible way, with the princess who was alive and talking after that crash, and it took 100 minutes, 1 hour and 40 minutes, to get her to a hospital where her life would have been saved. Now, if you and I, Samantha, were in Paris and we were in a crash and it took 140 minutes, 100 minutes, 1 hour and 40 minutes to get us to hospital, I think our families would want to know the reason why. And really, that's all he wanted. He wanted to know what had happened, why it had happened, and who was responsible for it. And he accepted that the jury did their best, and he always believed to his dying day that some more information would emerge in due course, which would prove his hypothesis that they were murdered.
And Michael, I don't know how recently you spoke to him. Do you think he regretted anything in his life?
No, I don't believe so. He was happiest with his own family. He never wanted to be part of society. He didn't want to go to nightclubs, although he owned one, or smart restaurants. He was very much a family man, and actually I think it was that element that attracted Diana to him, and she was always looking for a happy family life from the moment at the age of 6 her mother walked out of the home and she stood at the gate and watched her go. And in the Fayed family, she found a very happy family, and I think that's what attracted her to them. No, Mohamed didn't. I saw Mohamed a couple of years ago, but I've been in touch with him. He sent me a lovely, funny letter on my 80th birthday in March. He was sparking, and he was still very much enjoying life, never happier than when he was with his grandchildren. But any family anywhere who loses a child in those circumstances is never going to be quite the same. But he took great comfort in the very many people he managed to help around the world. I mean, there were the number of cases that came in. I mean, I used to say to him sometimes, why do you do this? And he said, well, if you do something good in life, you come back to something good. And I said, well, that's Buddhism, that's not Islam, that's not Christianity. He said, it doesn't matter. In the Quran and in the Bible, it says, be good to people, and it will be good to you. So he was very much a philosopher in his own way. He loved people, he enjoyed people, he loved being in the store. A day away from Harrods was a day that he didn't enjoy. But we'll miss him. I mean, he was a great character.
All right, Michael Cole, fascinating to get your memories and reflections there on Mohamed Al Fayed, who has died.